Shalom. Call halal Yahweh Basham Shai Basham Rakakwadash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders. Salutations to all my fellow laborers. Doing this work in truth and sincerity, risking their lives and their freedom to do so now more so than ever. To the scattered elect that are scattered around the four corners of the earth, that be like unto the speckled bird, the Israelite foreigners. And to the Akwaf that are listening and learning, to you I say Shalom. This is your brother Malcolm coming at you with another lesson in truth. And this video, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Basham Shai, is definitely going on the critical race theory, because I put up a post on all of my channels, and the one that went up on Malcolm, it got a lot of attention and a lot of comments. And I think we're gonna label this video. Matter of fact, let me find it. One of the sisters, I forget her name. I'm sure when I get to the comments, I'll see it. She said it. She said there's a lot of cognitive dissidence on this comment board, and that's exactly what it is. It's a lot of cognitive dissonance, because Edom does not want to be held accountable for what they did. And then you got this Rasta saying we're not black, we're Spaniards. Man, these people are tripping, man. But yeah, let's go to it. It was, the post was an image of slave masters taking a child from a so-called black woman, from a Judite. And he's walking away with her child, and she's screaming for it. Which there's so many curses in Deuteronomy that fits. You know, when you go to Deuteronomy 28th chapter, and you begin to read from the 15th verse to the end, this particular scene from this meme, from this post, is in there. And like I said, Edom, they do not want to be held responsible from a lifestyle, from a system that was put in place through rape, rob, and murder. All right, rape, robbery, and murder of lands that were not their own, that was passed on to their descendants, and even to some of the descendants who didn't receive of it. They received the benefits of the law of the land just for simply looking like they look. Okay, now grant you, before I start reading these comments, I much needs to say this statement. See, the Israelites got scattered to the four corners of the earth, and they're mixed among all people. All right, they're mixed among all people, so they're not all gonna look like a so-called Negro. Some of them are actually going to look like the heathen nations, including so-called white people. So this isn't a color thing. This is a seed line thing. All right, and it's Edom, which always makes it about color, because that is the false narrative that they push, that they may hide behind. Like this whole whiteness thing that came about in 1681. All right, in 1681 in Virginia was the first time in any legal documents in the United States where it was actually written that there was a form of humanity called white people. Prior to that, you weren't called by color. All right, color was a description of certain people in some cases, but it definitely didn't determine what your race was. You couldn't call someone black and then that just be a race, or someone white and that just be a race. That's a new age thing, which is a controlled false narrative. All right, so let's jump into some of these. And forgive me, I'm a little under the weather. I'm had a really nasty sinus infection that's leaving me. But what the video, so let me see if I can put it in front of the camera, and yeah, there's an image. All right, and it says, you may choose to forget, but yeah, you may choose to forget, but I refuse. So I took that, because another brother had posted it, And I took it, screenshotted it, and put it up again. And wow! And wait till I start reading some of these comments. And there's some pretty popular Salakia people on this channel that you may know of. My man Undead Chronic even chimed in on it. All right, and I've subscribed to him because of a lot of the information that he brings out when it's referring to these demonic wicked women here in America. All right, but them not understanding color at all, that color is an indicator, not a definite, because you can look like a so-called white man, but if your father is a so-called black man, then guess what? You're not white. And that fact is lost in the sauce here in modern day time. They're either going to try to say you mixed, or they're just going to characterize you by what you call. So let's grab a quick scripture to substantiate that, and it's the go-to scripture, especially for anyone who might be new. And that scripture is Numbers 1:18, and it reads, "And they assembled all the congregation together on the first day of the second month, and they declared their pedigrees after their families by the house of their fathers, according to the number of the names, from 20 years old and upward by their polls." So so the house of your father is your father's bloodline seed, the seed that you come from, which determines your nationality, your race, not the womb you come out of. All right, that's why you can have a guy that has children with different women. His children are all 100% brother and sister. There's no such thing as half in that instance if you have the same father. Now, if you have different fathers, now we got problems, because that goes into something referred to as a lesser kin, because your brother, his bloodline is a whole different seed line, or your sister, her bloodline is a whole different seed line. But if you have the same fathers, then you came from the same seed, therefore you are the same. All right, if you plant an apple tree in America and take that same seeds from that tree and plant it in Mexico, it's still an apple tree. All right, this isn't so. It's just because the seeds sprung up in Mexico doesn't change the seed. If you can receive and understand that simple breakdown. But let's go back to the comment board and let's begin to read some of these. It's a lot of them, so we're not going to go through all of them. But yeah, it was a sister, Kristen Simpson, that said it. The cognitive dissonance in this comment section is astonishing, and I agree with her 144%. It is. I even think this at the water. That will be the name of our response video, Yahweh Ratazah. And then the brother Yaiqua Banyamyan responded, "White people have been reduced to pretending to be non-white online to try and convince us, flatter or weasel their way out of what's coming to them. They know who they are. They know who we are. They know nothing will save them. It's their way of begging for mercy. So unless the fellow Israelite wants to join them in their calamity, they do well to obey the prophecy, their downfall." Obadiah 1:18. Well, I was going to get those scriptures. At least that one. Isaiah 14:21 and Revelation 13:10. And those are all really bad, because, matter of fact, let's go to Isaiah, since he put that in there. Let's go to Isaiah 14:21. And it reads, "Prepare slaughter for his children, for the iniquity of their fathers, that they do not rise, nor possess the land, nor fill the face of the world with cities." All right? And it says, "For I will rise up against them, saith Yahweh of hosts, and cut off from Babylon." This is how you know that they rule Babylon, future Babylon, which is America. Okay? "The name and remnant and son and nephew, saith Yahweh." So there's going to be no males left to produce seed. See, their women are going to be having the seed of Israelites and other heathens. All right, until that done away with, until that day that they get rounded up and they get destroyed. That's what it is, and that's what's going to happen. All right, little sisters are intrigued with the prophet. She's still looking. Let's go back to the comment board. I'm looking for the. Oh, here we go. Wow, this guy, Noctis Lucius Calum, he said, except for no one alive was a slave to any degree, every single culture had slaves throughout our history, so not one person based on reality is free from criticism for what our ancestors did. Also, blacks sold blacks when the slave trade began, but that's just part of the history people ignore because feelings of politics, of course. Also, I'm brown and not an oppressed victim. All right. Well, you may be brown, but that still doesn't mean that you're not an Edomite or not a heathen. And it's true. And there's no such thing as black people. Once again, when people use that terminology, black and white, that's what makes you look. Especially for you Israelites, don't put on there white people. Put on there so-called white people, so that I know that you alert. All right. That I know that you are not an adversary, because it says if you what's that scripture? If you hold on, let me just go to it, because before I mess it up, I'm pretty sure it's Luke 11:23. It's funny how it's like I come up here all alone, and all of a sudden I get all this company when no one comes up here where I am ever. But yeah, this is Luke 11:23, and it reads, "He that is not with me is against me, and he that gathereth not with me scattereth." So, if you're going to mention something about white people, you're going to say so-called and put up, Edom, all right, and not Japhet, because they're not Japhet. Japhet was a brown complected people. Okay, so that way I know who and what I'm dealing with. But back to the comment board. So let's open it up, because there's 47 comments off that comment, back and forths. And then Christian System said, "Really?" Simpson said, "Really? It's still American history. So you said all that to say what? There are also a difference between indentured servitude and chattel slavery. Look it up. Let's not fail to mention that Jim Crow era and how we were mass lynchings here in America post-slavery. Black people were stripped from their heritage, language, customs, scattered to the four corners of the so-called earth. Name a group of people who have experienced some ish like that. Please enlighten me. All right. And then she corrected herself and said so-called black people, so-called. So right, and that would also include so-called natives and so-called Latinos. All right, you got to remember they were keeping just as many, if not more, Hebrew customs, and so many Hebrew relics were found among them here in the Americas, and there are books written about it from the 1500s all the way up to the 19th century. Talking about their relation to the Jews, their Hebrew heritage. All right. So, and then he responded to her, "Did you look up what party started the slave trade?" And so he tried to jump political, man. Look, and I answered. I said, "Look, man, it doesn't matter what party started the slave trade. What matters is that whether it be the left or right, Democrat or Republican, or whatever party in between, they're all still the same wings on the same damn bird. All right, they all were in agreement to keep our people oppressed. Just read Psalms the 83rd chapter, man. It breaks down who the enemies of the Lord are by name, by race, and said what they would do. All right, and the so-called white man is mentioned in that list twice. Okay. Then Yaquab jumped in and said, Most of the people who whine about 9/11 are not from NYC. Most of the people who whine about the Holocaust were not living during World War II. And if they were in no concentration camp, get the picture. So what he said was very powerful, because it's okay for them to remember and always remember the Holocaust, but we can't remember what happened to us. And then the Holocaust didn't set up the policy and things here in America. Well, actually, it kind of did, but the oppression of the so-called Negro, Latino, Native American, that was set up early on, when laws were put in place to prevent them from buying property, from owning guns, from being able to vote. All right, you went in, you took their you stripped them of their heritage. You took whole neighborhoods and wealth from them when they built themselves up here in captivity, and you put policy in place to ensure that they would never raise up again. All right, Chicago is one of the most segregated cities in the whole country, man. We got to talk about redlining. And the FHA, its first 40 years of operation, it operated in a whites-only function, which means that only whites were allowed to buy, sell, trade, and pass property on to their children. All right, and then hundreds of years before that, the same thing, the land grabs, the land giveaways. The $5 Indian head. You had those Dawes Roll Indians, all these white people who signed that roll so that they could get benefits of being natives, and they weren't even natives. Those are the ones that own the casinos for the most part, get all the college and home loans and grants and all that thing, not the actual natives. Okay, Gadites, as they should be called properly. And man, it's so many. But I'm a through the Spirit, I may come back to this maybe when we go on live, when I hook up with the camp. But right now, I'm just gonna bring this up because I watched a movie last night called The Nightingale, and basically it showed you the true nature of Esau Edom, the so-called white man, when they were in Australia, and how this officer was bragging about how he killed all the blacks, he cleared them out. They would go to these indigenous people, these brown complected people, for help, and yet they wouldn't even call them by their names. They just called them boy. Even the women did. The disrespect, they just raped and murdered as they chose. They hung them on their own lands. There's one scene where the guy's crying and saying that this is my land, as they were treating them and beating them and treating them really bad. He's like, but this is my land. Why, how is this happening on my land? Because that is the true nature of the so-called white man, and that's how he got everything that he has, and he just refuses to acknowledge that. All right, so this is Ecclesiastes 3:15, and it reads, "That which have been is now, and that which is to be have already been, and God requireth that which is past." So you may think it's been a long time. You may complain that nobody alive, all right, but the benefits are still benefiting so-called white people today. And the damage is still damaging so-called black people and so-called natives and Hispanics to this day. All right, because you got to remember, a lot of so-called Mexicans are called aliens, and a great portion of America was their home. So they're called aliens on their own land, kind of like those Australians were. And I highly suggest that you watch that movie, man, because Esau was just a brutal, murderous criminal, man, using his blessing, which was the sword. Let's get that and wrap this up. This is Genesis 27:40. All right, and Esau had all those metal weapons, and the Australians were fighting with wooden sticks, man. All right, and they still were better warriors. As a matter of fact, not to get off subject, but when the Trojan War and all those movies that Esau always makes with the Achilles and Ajax, and they always put in white men, those were those Australians. That was them and the Hawaiians. Those are the true Japhetic people of Greece. That was their land. And it's funny that they got driven out of Europe, ran to the islands, and then Esau followed them to the islands and suppressed and oppressed them there. But this is Genesis 27:40, and it reads, And by thy sword shalt thou live, and thou shalt serve thy brother, and it shall come to pass when thou shalt have dominion, and thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. All right, and so Esau was a servant in the ancient world, but now he's a ruling class people, and he has lived by the sword, just as his blessing promised he would. So if you're living by the sword, that don't mean that clearly means that you're not going to do things fairly or righteously. You're going to use your weapons and your might to take whatever you want, and that's exactly what they did. What you're looking at is the evidence of that. Call halal Yahweh by Shema Bashai by Shem Rakakwadash Wa Ababa Kwam Yasharala.